I'm not a superstar. I'm an ass kicker. I am Brock Lesnar. That's it.
He's a douchebag. That was the kind of feeling Brock Lesnar could create, and it grew louder when 8 powerful names tried to get him banned, blocked, and pushed out of the business he wants. This is the story of Brock Lesnar, his backstage enemy, and the people who tried to stop, expose him, and shut his name out of the spotlight. Let us be fair first. Brock Lesnar was a giant. He was one of the most dominant, valuable names in WWE, UFC, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and all of sports entertainment. He was fast for his size. He was strong like a machine. He drew huge money. When his music hit, the whole crowd stood up. Companies paid him a fortune because he could sell out buildings and pay-per-views on his name alone. For years, he looked untouchable. But being big does not always mean being safe. And as this story starts to heat up, use the hype feature and give this video hype, because this is not just about one fight or one bad night. It is about 8 names who, in 8 different ways, helped turn Brock Lesnar from the man companies wanted into the man companies had to hide. The most recent trouble shows just how fast things can change. In January 2024, a civil lawsuit was filed by a former WWE employee named Janelle Grant. The lawsuit was against Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis, and WWE. The filing described severe claims, including sexual assault, abuse of power, and human trafficking. At first, the filing did not use Brock Lesnar's name. Filing described a world-famous athlete and a former UFC heavyweight champion. The research states that later legal amendments identified Brock Lesnar by name. It is important to be clear, these were claims made in a lawsuit. The lawsuit alleged these things. They were not proven as criminal facts, but for a big company, even the risk was enough. WWE and TKO moved to protect the company. Lesnar was treated as a danger to the brand. He was pulled from the 2024 Royal Rumble plans. His pictures were scrubbed from promotional materials. His character was removed from mobile and console video games. One of the biggest attractions in the business was suddenly wiped from view, almost overnight. So how did a star this big become someone companies had to hide? The answer is not one jealous locker room. It is not one single scandal. It is 8 different people, each one a different kind of threat, each one finding a different way to challenge the man they call the Beast. Some used lawsuits, some used walkouts, some used public callouts, some used corporate power, some used a backstage confrontation. Together, they tell the full story of how the biggest beast in the business kept running into walls. This is the thing fans often get wrong. People love to imagine one big group, one jealous gang, all working together to bury Brock. The real story is not that simple. There was no single secret meeting. There was no one villain. Instead, there were 8 separate problems, spread across many years and many countries. Some happened in America, one happened in Japan. Some happened in a wrestling, one happened in a cave, one happened in a court. Each one chipped away at the same towering figure. And when you put all 8 together, you start to see a pattern that is hard to ignore. Let us count them down, starting at number 8. Number 8 is Triple H. To understand Triple H, you have to look at 2 very different times in history. The story starts old and ends new, and both halves point at the same man. Go back to Lesnar's first WWE run. Between 2002 and 2004, Brock was new, but he was rising fast. He was so good, so quick, and so powerful that he made the older stars nervous. The research says there were reports of political friction between Triple H and Lesnar. It says Triple H allegedly refused to work with him or put him over because Brock was climbing the ladder too quick. To Triple H, this young monster was a threat to his own spot at the top. But back then, Triple H could not stop Brock from becoming a monster. Lesnar won the WWE Championship at just 25 years old. He beat legends. He looked unstoppable. The friction was there, but the rocket had already left the ground. Now jump forward many years. The roles flip in a way nobody could have planned. Triple H, whose real name is Paul Levesque, became the chief content officer of WWE under the new company called TKO Group Holdings. He went from being a wrestler in the locker room to being one of the most powerful bosses in the entire business. He now held the pen. He now made the big calls. And when the Janelle Grant lawsuit landed in January 2024, it was Triple H who sat in the corporate chair. He became the main figure responsible for keeping Brock out of picture. He had to think about corporate sponsors. He had to think about television. He had to think about how the public would react. To protect all of that, he carried out a full purge of Brock Lesnar from active programming. Lesnar was pulled from the Royal Rumble. His images came down. His video game character vanished. The man Triple H once could not stop was now the man Triple H had to remove. This is not a story about Triple H being petty. This is a story about a corporate gate doing his job. He was responding to legal risk and brand risk, not to a personal grudge. And that is exactly what makes it sting. Think about the irony. In the old day, Brock's huge talent was too big to hold back. In the new day, Brock's huge name was too risky. The same man stood at both doors. The first time, the door would not close. The second time, the door slammed shut. It proved a hard truth. Even Brock's massive name could turn into a liability. When the biggest star in the building becomes a danger to the brand will always protect itself first. Look at what was actually taken away. Being pulled from the Royal Rumble is not a small thing. The Royal Rumble is one of the biggest nights of the year. For Brock to be erased from those plans, the risk had to be serious in the eyes of the company. Then his pictures came off the marketing. Then his video game character was deleted. A video game lives forever. Removing him from one is a loud signal. It tells fans, sponsors, and partners that the company wants distance from this. Bit by bit, the company was building a wall, and Triple H was the one stacking the bricks. And remember the timing. WWE was moving into the new TKO Group Holdings era. This was a moment when the company badly wanted to look clean, stable, and safe for big partners. Television deals and sponsors were on the line. In that kind of moment, a name tied to a serious lawsuit is the last thing a company wants on screen. So the man who could once not be stopped became the man who had to be set aside. For all his power, Brock had no answer for that. A wrestler cannot grapple his way out of a legal risk. He cannot suplex a sponsor's worry. The decision was made in an office, far above the ring, and there was nothing his muscles could do about it. Number 7 is Mark Hunt. Most wrestling problems get handled quiet, backstage, behind closed doors. Mark Hunt did the opposite. He took his fight, Brock Lesnar, into the law and into the anti-doping system, where there are no scripts and no easy outs. The story is UFC 200. In July 2016, after years away from the cage, Brock Lesnar made a shock return to mixed martial arts. His opponent was Mark Hunt, a tough and respected heavyweight, known for his heavy hands. On the night, Lesnar won by unanimous decision. He was bigger, and he used his wrestling to control the fight. The numbers backed it up. Lesnar weighed in at 265.5 pounds, and Hunt weighed in at 264.5 pounds, so the size was close, but the output was not. Lesnar landed 137 of his 167 total strikes, and 51 of his 75 significant strikes. He also completed 4 of his 8 takedown attempts. Hunt, by contrast, landed 46 of his 68 total strikes, and only 13 of his 32 significant strikes. Hunt scored 0 takedowns. Lesnar used his grappling to keep the fight on the ground and to grind out the win. It looked like a clean victory for the returning star, but the win did not stay clean. After the fight, the United States Anti-Doping Agency and the Nevada State Athletic Commission revealed bad news. Lesnar had failed drug tests, both before the fight and on the night of fight. The research states that he tested positive for hydroxychloroquine. This is a substance that can be used to restart natural testosterone and to help mask steroid use. The fallout was heavy. The Nevada Commission suspended Lesnar for 1 year. They fined him $250,000, and they overturned his victory. The win over Mark Hunt was changed to a no contest. On paper, the fight no longer counted as a win at all. Mark Hunt was not satisfied with that. He launched a legal campaign. He sued Lesnar, he sued UFC President Dana White, and he sued the UFC itself. The lawsuit alleged racketeering, fraud, breach of contract, and conspiracy. In simple terms, Hunt argued that Lesnar and the UFC had bypassed the normal drug testing protocols to make a big, money-making pay-per-view fight happen. Hunt felt that his safety and the fairness of the sport had been put at risk so that a huge attraction could be booked. Now, here is the honest part of the story. Hunt did not win in court. His lawsuit was ultimately dismissed in 2019 after a long battle. So we should not say that Hunt beat Lesnar in front of a judge. He did not. But the damage to Brock's name was already done. The story stuck. The failed test was real. The suspension was real. The fine was real. The overturned result was real. And Hunt's loud, public fight forced the athletic commissions to watch more closely. His campaign painted Lesnar as a special attraction who seemed to play by special rules. It raised a simple, uncomfortable question. Did the money matter more than fairness? For a man who built his whole image on being a real, dangerous, legitimate fighter, that question cut deep. Lesnar's UFC return was supposed to prove he was the most fearsome athlete alive. Instead, it left a stain. It pushed him toward his second retirement from mixed martial arts and helped build a wall against any return to the octagon. Mark Hunt did not get the win on the scorecard, but he made sure nobody could look at that win and call it pure. And think about Mark Hunt's side of it. He had stepped into that cage to fight a man, fair and square. He had put his own body and his own safety on the line. When the test results came out, Hunt felt that the fairness of the contest had been taken from him. From his point of view, he had not lost a clean fight. He had been placed in an unfair one. That is why he fought so hard in court, even after the result was already changed. To Hunt, this was about more than money. It was about respect for the sport itself. This is the heart of the negative side of the story. Brock Lesnar was a huge draw, and huge draws can bring in huge money. The worry that Hunt raised was simple but serious. When a star is that valuable, does the business bend the rules to keep him in the ring? Does the money start to matter more than the fairness? Hunt could not prove his full case in court, but he forced everyone watching to ask the question. And once that question is asked about a fighter, it never fully goes away. Number 6 is Chris Jericho. The wrestling business has its own way of policing itself. When something goes too far, it is often a respected veteran who steps up and says, enough. With Brock Lesnar, the man who stepped up was Chris Jericho, and the issue was safe. The story is SummerSlam 2016. Brock Lesnar faced Randy Orton in the main event. It was meant to be physical, but it became something else. The match ended with Lesnar throwing a series of stiff, real elbows straight at Orton's head. Orton was left bleeding badly. The wound needed 10 staples. The research also says Orton suffered a severe concussion. It was a brutal finish, and it did not look like a normal wrestling spot. It looked dangerous. Backstage, Chris Jericho saw it happen, and Jericho did not know the truth. He could not tell if the stiff finish had been planned and approved, or if Lesnar had simply gone off script and hurt a man for real. To a locker room leader, that uncertainty is the scariest part. If a top star can do that, and nobody stops it, then nobody is safe. So Jericho confronted him. As Lesnar came back through the curtain, Jericho got in his face. He demanded to know the truth. He told Lesnar, loudly, that this kind of reckless behavior was unprofessional and dangerous to the entire locker. A heated argument followed. It became so tense that Vince McMahon and Triple H had to step in and pull the two men apart. This was bigger than a single backstage row. Chris Jericho was speaking for everyone in that locker room who had no power on their own. He was a tenured, respected name, and he used that standing to push back against a double stand. For years, it felt like Lesnar lived by different rules. He came and went as he pleased. He was treated as special, and it seemed like the normal safety expectations did not always apply to him the way they applied to others. Jericho's stand drew a line. By confronting Lesnar direct, he forced management to deal with the growing resentment in the back. He made it clear that talent had a limit, and that limit was the safety of the people. Brock shared the ring. Here is the heart of it. On screen, Brock being a beast was a great story. The crowd loved the idea of an unstoppable monster, but that same beast image became a real problem when other wrestlers had to trust him with their bodies and their health. A wrestler puts his life in his opponent's hands every night. If that trust breaks, the whole business breaks. Chris Jericho understood that, and he was not willing to stay quiet while it happened. It is worth sitting with what happened to Randy Orton that 10 staples, a severe concussion, blood across his face. This was a top star, a former world champ, left badly hurt in the middle of the ring. Whether or not the finish was approved, the sight of it scared the locker room. If this could happen to Randy Orton in a main event, it could happen to anyone. That fear is what Jericho carried when he stormed up to Brock. And notice who had to break it up. It took Vince McMahon and Triple H, two of the most powerful men in the company, to pull these two apart. That tells you how hot the moment was. It also tells you that the issue went all the way to the top. Management could no longer pretend the locker room was happy. By forcing the bosses to step in, Jericho dragged the problem into the open. He made the company face the resentment it had been ignoring. For one night, the man who never seemed to face consequences had to stand and answer for what he had done. That, in this business, is a rare and important thing. Number 5 is Daniel Cormier. For a long time, fans whispered that Brock Lesnar was secretly banned. They saw the sign, they guessed, but nobody could prove it from the inside. Then Daniel Cormier said it out loud. The moment came in July 2025. Daniel Cormier, the former UFC heavyweight champ, appeared on a podcast called MightyCast, hosted by Demetrius Johnson. During that conversation, Cormier said something that turned the rumors into a real story. He stated that Brock Lesnar had been placed on a joint TKO corporate banned list. To understand why that matters, you have to understand TKO. TKO Group Holding is the parent company. It owns both WWE and the UFC. They are no longer two separate worlds. They sit under one roof. So when Cormier said Lesnar was on a TKO banned list, he was not talking about just one company. He was talking about both. If TKO treats Brock as banned, then the door is shut in the wrestling ring and in the octagon at the same time. Cormier did not stop there. He explained why. He said the decision came down to legal liability connected to the Janelle Grant lawsuit. The company was carrying serious legal risk, and Brock's name was tied to that risk. Cormier said Lesnar was in so much trouble that any physical return to either the ring or the cage was completely blocked. The company's top priority was protecting its public image and its brand. Everything else came second. This was the public confirmation that fans had been waiting. Up to that point, the company could hide behind silence. They could let people guess. They never had to admit anything, but once a respected voice like Daniel Cormier said it plainly on a popular show, the silence broke. The speculative shield was gone. And here is why this section matters so much to the bigger story. Cormier did not just show that Brock Brock was controversial to fans. He showed that Brock had become radioactive to the business itself. There is a difference. A wrestler can be hated by fans and still be booked. But a wrestler who is seen as a legal and brand danger by his own parent company is in a different kind of trouble. That is a person the business wants to keep at arm's length. Cormier confirmed that the merger of these two giants had created one central control room. From that one room, a single decision could lock the most valuable attraction in the world out of both of its biggest stages. That is a stunning amount of power. And Brock Lesnar, for all his fame, was on the wrong side of it. There is also something telling about who said it. Daniel Cormier is not a small voice. He is a former two-division champ and a respected name across combat sports. When a man like that speaks plainly on a popular show, people listen, and the words carry weight. He could have stayed quiet. He could have dodged the question. Instead, he laid it out for everyone to hear. That choice turned a quiet rumor into a public fact. And think about what the words radioactive really mean here. It is not just that fans were divided about Brock. It is that his own parent company saw his name as something dangerous to touch. A radioactive name is one that other people back away from, not because of what he did in the ring, but because of the risk he carries into the room. For a man whose whole brand was built on being wanted, being chased, being the prize, this was a complete flip. Brock spent his career as the man companies fought to sign. Now, by Cormier's account, he had become the man one company worked hard to keep at a distance. That is how far the ground had shifted under his feet. Number 4 is Shinsuke Nakamura. It would be easy to think that all of Brock's problems came from WWE politics or American drama, but that is not true. His trouble crossed the ocean. In Japan, a country where respect and tradition sit at the center of the wrestling business, Brock Lesnar left damage too. The man who put a face on that damage was Shinsuke Nakamura. After leaving WWE the first time, Lesnar signed with New Japan Pro Wrestling. This was around the mid-2005 to 2007 period. He arrived as a huge name, and he quickly won the IWGP Heavyweight Champ, the top title in the company. On paper, it was a strong move. A global star holding the biggest belt in Japan should have been good for everyone, but the research says his attitude was a problem. His approach to the promotion, its history, and its wrestlers was widely criticized as mercenary and deeply disrespectful. In Japan, that is a serious charge. The Japanese style values heart, effort, and respect craft. A wrestler is expected to honor the tradition and give everything in the ring. Lesnar, it was said, did not. In 2006, Nakamura faced Lesnar in a championship match. Nakamura was a top exponent of the strong style, a hard-hitting, deeply respected way of wrestling. This should have been a proud night. Instead, it became a painful. In his autobiography, Nakamura wrote that Lesnar had completely checked out of the professional side of the match. He described a dismissive attitude toward the sacred traditions of Japanese wrestling culture. Nakamura recalled crying backstage after the encounter. He felt a deep sense of professional and cultural disrespect. Think about that for a moment. Nakamura was not a rookie. He was a serious, proud form, and the experience of sharing the ring with Lesnar left him in tears, not from the physical pain, but from the sense of being disrespected. Then came the final insult. Shortly after the match, Lesnar got into a severe contract dispute with NJPW management. He refused to return to the country to defend the title, and when he left, he walked out with the physical AWGP belt still in his possession. He took the actual championship with. This was a breach of contract, and Japan answered firm. NJPW officially stripped Lesnar of the championship. Then they blacklisted him for years. The doors of the Japanese wrestling world were closed to him. Nakamura's honest words, written down for everyone to read, sealed Brock's reputation in Japan. He was branded as an untrustworthy performer who did not care for the culture he had stepped. This section proves something important. Brock's problem was never just one locker room or one country. Even in a place built on respect and honor, far from WWE politics, his approach caused real harm. The pattern followed him across the world. Walking out with the physical belt is the detail that says it all. A championship belt is not just a prop. In wrestling, it is a symbol of honor and trust. The company hands it to you because they believe you will carry it with pride and defend it the right way. To leave the country and keep the actual belt while refusing to defend the title is about as deep an insult as a wrestler can offer. It treats the trophy like a souvenir instead of a sacred trust. That is why NJPW acted so firm. Stripping the title was the first step. The years of blacklisting were the second. Japan did not simply move on. It closed the door and kept it closed. And the reason is the same reason that ran through every other chapter. Brock seemed to treat his work as a transaction. He came, he took what he wanted, and he left on his own terms. In a culture that prizes loyalty and effort above almost everything, that approach was never going to be forgiven. Nakamura's tears backstage were not weakness. They were the honest reaction of a proud man who had given his all to a partner who, in his eyes, gave nothing back. Number 3 is Stone Cold Steve Austin. Not every act of resistance comes from an enemy. Sometimes the pushback comes from a legend who simply refuses to do something thinks is wrong. That is the story of Stone Cold Steve Austin, the biggest star of the Attitude Era, and the night he said no. The year was 2002. WWE had a plan for Brock Lesnar. They wanted to use Steve Austin to help build him up far. The idea was for Lesnar to beat Austin on a random, unadvertised episode of Monday Night Raw. It was set to be a qualifying match for the King of the Ring tournament. On the surface, it might sound fine. A young monster beating a top legend is a great way to make the monster look strong, but Austin saw a big problem. He believed this match was far too valuable to give away free on regular television, with no proper build and no pay-per-view payoff. A match between Stone Cold and Brock Lesnar was a huge money fight. To Austin, throwing it onto a normal Raw with no story and no warning was a waste of something precious. It was like burning money for no reason. So Austin refused, and then he walked out of the company. It is important to be fair about what this was and what it was not. The research says Austin did not formally lobby for a ban on Brock Lesnar. He was not trying to get Brock blacklisted. He had nothing against Brock as a person in this story. His fight was with the booking decision, not with the man. This was creative resistance, plain and simple, but the effect was real. Austin's walkout severely disrupted WWE's plans to establish Lesnar as the absolute top dog. The company had to scramble and pivot. The careful machine that was built to push Brock to the moon suddenly lost one of its biggest pieces. Around this same time, Austin was also dealing with his own personal legal issues with Deborah Marshall. That was happening in the background, but the wrestling story stayed focused on the booking dispute. What Austin proved was simple and powerful. An established star had real leverage. A veteran could look at management's plan, decide it was foolish, and refuse to take part. By forcing the company to step back from a premier attraction, Austin showed that the system pushing Brock to the top was not as solid as it looked. WWE was so eager to force Brock's rise that it was willing to damage logic, story, and the trust of its veteran talent. Austin's stand exposed that flaw for everyone to see. And here is the part that should sit with you. Austin was right. A first match between Stone Cold and Brock Lesnar was one of the biggest fights the company could ever sell. Built properly, with a real story and a pay-per-view payoff, it could have drawn enormous money. Throwing it onto a free, unadvertised episode of Raw would have burned that value in a single night, with most fans not even tuning in to see it. Once a match like that is given away, you can never sell it for the first time again. It is gone. So the resistance here was not really about Brock at all. It was about the careless way the company was willing to use its biggest pieces just to push Brock far. Austin would not be part of that way. His walkout was costly and dramatic, but it made a clear point. The machine built to elevate Brock was moving so quickly that it was making bad decisions. Sometimes, the person who slows the machine down is not the enemy. Sometimes that person is the only one in the room thinking clearly. Austin played that role, and the company had to live with the disruption he caused. Number 2 is Matt Riddle. So far, the story has shown people and companies pushing Brock out, but Brock could play that game too. He did not only get protected by others, he could also protect himself, and he could shut people out when he wanted. The clearest example is Matt Riddle. Matt Riddle came into WWE from the UFC, just like Brock. He was young, talented, and very confident. He had a goal, and he was not shy about it. In public interviews and on social media, Riddle said again and again that he wanted to retire the Beast incarnate. He wanted the match with Brock Lesnar, and he wanted to be the one to end him. But the way Riddle did it broke the rules of the locker room. WWE has a strict hierarchy. Younger talent are expected to show respect and not call out top stars without permission. Riddle's loud, unscripted call-outs crossed that line, and Brock Lesnar noted. The breaking point came at the 2020 Royal Rumble. Brock Lesnar, with Paul Heyman and corporate security beside him, cornered Riddle backstage. The research says Lesnar grabbed Riddle. He told him to keep his mouth shut, and he made one thing crystal clear. He said they would never share a ring in a singles match. Not a chance. This was not just a heated moment faded away. Lesnar used his huge political power inside the company to make it stick. He made sure that WWE writers and bookers never put the two of them together in a singles program. The match Riddle wanted so badly was killed before it could ever happen. The two men did briefly share a ring in a multi-man elimination chamber match in 2022, but that is not the singles fight Riddle had been chasing. Brock allowed a crowd, but never a one-on-one stage. This shows a different side of the Lesnar story. Up to now, we have seen lawsuits and walkouts and corporate bans aimed at Brock. But here, Brock is the one doing the block. He executed his own personal blacklist. A younger wrestler tried to use Brock's name to climb, and Brock simply refused to let it happen. He had the power to say no, and he used it. It tells you how much weight Brock carried backstage. A top star could quietly end another man's dream match with a single decision. For all the people who tried to ban Brock, Brock could also ban others. He was a target, yes, but he was also a gatekeeper of his own. It also shows how the locker room hierarchy really works. WWE is not a free. There is an order to. Younger talent are expected to earn their spot and to show respect to the men at the top. Matt Riddle ignored that order. talk. He went straight for the biggest name in the build, again and again, in pub without permission. To Brock, that was not ambition. That was disrespect. And Brock had the power to make Riddle pay for it. There is a hard lesson buried in this chapter. Talent and confidence are not enough on their own. Riddle had skill. He had a clear goal. He wanted the match, and on paper, it could have been a good story. But none of that mattered, because the man he wanted simply said no, and the man he wanted had more power than he did. The dream match died not because of bad wrestling, but because of backstage politics. For Riddle, it was a painful reminder that in this business, the people at the top can shape your career whether you like it or not. And for the rest of the locker room, it was a clear warning. Crossing the beast had a cost. Number one is Jon Moxley. The biggest crack in the Brock Lesnar myth did not come from a lawsuit or a corporate office. It came from a fellow wrestler who simply told the truth about what Brock was like to work. That man is Jon Moxley, and his story is the one that hits the hard. Back in WWE, Jon Moxley wrestled under the name Dean Ambrose. At WrestleMania 32, he was booked against Brock Lesnar in a no-holds-barred street. On paper, this was a dream setup. A no-holds-barred match is meant to be wild, violent, and unforgettable. Fans expected chaos, weapons, and a brutal war. They expected one of the most extreme matches of the year. What they got instead was a letdown. The match was widely criticized as short and underwhelming. It felt more like a quick squash than an epic fight. Moxley took the loss after very little offense of his own. The big, hardcore showdown people had imagined never really arrived. For a WrestleMania match between two tough men, it was a strange and flat result. For a long time, fans did not know why. Then Moxley told, after he left WWW and joined All Elite Wrestling, Moxley spoke openly about what really happened. He used his public platform, most notably on Steve Austin's Broken Skull session, to blow the whistle on Brock's conduct. And what he described was damning. The research says Moxley described straight-up laziness from Lesnar during the match planning. According to Moxley, Brock rejected every creative idea that was brought to him. He refused to use extreme or dramatic props that could have made the match feel special. He showed a complete lack of interest in putting on a memorable performance. The match was flat because, by Moxley's account, Brock did not want to do the work to make it great. This is the moment the myth cracked. For years, Brock Lesnar was sold as a once-in-a-lifetime special attraction. The story was that he was a rare beast, a unique force, a man worth every dollar. But Moxley pulled back the curtain. He painted a picture of a transactional part-timer who did not care to protect his peers or to deliver a match worthy of the biggest stage in the business. That word, transactional, mattered. It suggests Brock showed up, did the bare minimum, took the money, and left. Moxley's words made fans and fellow wrestlers wonder out loud. Was Brock really a dedicated artist? Or was he only willing to work hard when it suited him? This critique was so powerful because it came from inside the ring. A lawyer can argue about legal risk, a commission can argue about drug tests, but only the man across the ring from Brock can tell you what he was really like to share that ring. Moxley was that man, and he gave the locker room and the fans a logical reason to doubt whether Brock deserved his dominant championship-level spot at all. Out of all 8 figures, this was the one that struck at the very core of Brock's value. The lawsuits questioned his conduct, the walkouts questioned the booking, but Moxley questioned the thing Brock was supposedly best at. He questioned the work itself. Think about how much was riding on that. WrestleMania is the biggest stage in the entire business. A no-holds-barred street fight on that stage should be a showcase. The fans had given their time and their money to see something wild. Moxley, then known as Dean Ambrose, was ready to bleed fight. By his account, Brock simply was not. He turned down the ideas. He refused the props. He showed no spark, and the match suffered in front of the biggest audience of the year. That is what makes Moxley's words so damning. They do not come from a fan guessing from the cheap seats. They come from the man who was standing right there, trying to build the match and meeting a wall of lazy. When the person in the ring with you tells the world that you did not care, that is hard to argue against. It is the most honest kind of testimony there is, and it reframes the whole Brock Lesnar story. The company sold him as a rare and special attraction, a man worth every dollar because he gave the fans something no one else could. Moxley's account suggests a different man. It suggests someone who showed up, did as little as he could get away with, collected his pay, and left. If that is true even some of the time, then the legend looks very different. It means the beast was only a beast when he felt like being. For a performer sold as the ultimate big match attraction, there may be no worse charge than that. So where does that leave us? Now the picture is complete. Brock Lesnar was too big to ignore. His name sold tickets, broke records, and made companies rich. But he was also too risky to fully trust, and at times, too unwilling to give his best. The 8 figures did not attack him in the same way. That is the key. Triple H used corporate power. Mark Hunt used the law and the anti-doping system. Chris Jericho used a locker room confrontation over safety. Daniel Cormier used a public call-out to expose the banned list. Shinsuke Nakamura exposed his disrespect in Japan. Stone Cold Steve Austin used a walkout as creative resistance resistance. Matt Riddle ran into Brock's own backstage power, and Jon Moxley exposed the laziness behind the myth. 8 people, 8 different weapons, one common target, and not one of them needed the others to do it. Each acted alone, in their own time, for their own reasons. That is what makes the pattern so striking. You do not need a giant conspiracy to slow down a giant. You only need enough separate people, each pushing back in their own way, until the pushing starts to add up. In the end, Brock's whole career is a battle between two things. On one side is money. On the other side is accountability. The business loved his drawing power, so it kept finding ways to bring him back. After the UFC suspension, he returned to wrestling. After the corporate ban, the company quietly brought him back again in late 2025 and 2026, putting him into a physical feud with a rising star. The money always pulled hard. That return tells you everything about how the business thinks. When the legal storm grew quieter and the headlines faded, TKO did not keep the door shut forever. It chose a slow, careful path back. Brock was eased into a fresh feud, this time against a rising star named Oba Femi, building toward a big show in Italy. The pattern is clear. First comes the ban, when the risk is loud. Then comes the quiet return, when the risk feels safer and the money calls again. It is a cycle, and Brock Lesnar has lived through it more than once. The return was not welcomed by everyone. In the arena, the live crowds reacted the way they always do for a legend. They cheered, they stood, they treated him like the special attraction he had always been. But outside the building, the reaction was sharper. Commentators and advocacy groups questioned the choice. Some argued that bringing Lesnar back before the legal matters were fully settled sent a troubling message. It suggested, to those critics, that the company's promises about reform sat below the pull of pay-per-view money and television and rating. That tension never went away. It simply moved into the background, waiting. But the accountability never fully went away. Each of these 8 figures, in their own way, made sure that Brock could never float above the rules forever. They proved that his physical dominance could not protect him from a safety complaint. His fame could not protect him from a failed drug test. And his massive drawing power could not protect him from being labeled radioactive when the legal risk grew too large. Let us end where fairness demands. Brock Lesnar remains one of the most powerful attractions that combat sports and professional wrestling ever seen. That is simply true. Few names in history have carried his weight or pulled his crowds. When he stands in the ring, people still believe they are looking at something special. His place in the story of this business is secure for good. None of the 8 figures changes that core fact. Brock was a real draw. He broke a famous undefeated streak at WrestleMania. He held world titles in wrestling and a world title in the cage. He moved the needle in a way that very few people ever have. The crowds were not wrong to be excited. There really was something rare about it. The fame was earned, at least in part, by genuine ability and a presence that filled an arena the moment he walked out. But his career carries a clear message too. Even the biggest beast can be stopped. When enough people in enough different rooms decide that the damage is no longer worth draw, the walls start to close in. Brock Lesnar was a giant. He was also, again and again, a man the business had to manage, contain, and sometimes hide. Greatness and trouble walked beside him the whole way, and that is the real story of the beast.